Welcome to my show. I'm a guest here. Her name is Lillian Silva. Mrs. Lillian, how are you doing, ma?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. And also, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. Firstly, you are a transformational leadership coach. Can you please, Mrs. Lillian, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Mrs. Lillian?
Yeah, so I mean, I am a leadership coach whose work is rooted in identity, emotional intelligence, and lived experiences. My journey actually began in childhood. My father planted this quiet anthem in me: Eu quero, eu posso, eu sou. I'm capable of. Uh, I want, I'm capable of, I am. And these words not only shaped how I saw myself, but they also shaped how I showed up for others. I've always been the type of person that people have come to for clarity, for truth, for grounding, long before I had a title. And I've always had this ability to not only see patterns that others miss, but to hear beneath the surface of what was being said. And over time, what I realized is that these weren't just personality traits, that these were actual skills that I possessed, and that I wasn't just supporting people, that I was actually already coaching long before I had a title. Today, my work focuses on helping leaders to put down their mask, to loosen that armor, and to reconnect with themselves so they can start leading from a place that feels authentic, a place that feels aligned with who they are, and a place that feels like home.
Exactly. We can actually relate to the world that is in a very busy space currently and the pressure that is in our world today. A lot of people, due to this pressure, could cause a lot of inner issues. And for us to actually know how to lead from our inner self and create those sense of guidance is very much powerful. And that is why I would like to drive if you've actually written any book or if you are planning to write any book in the coming future, Mrs. Lillian.
Currently, there is no plans to write a book. My work is more focused currently right now on the trilogies that I'm building. So I've built a trilogy that's posted on LinkedIn right now, and it's Arc One, so it contains 3 posts in it, and it takes a reader from the macro, the micro, to the self. So in this specific trilogy, post one was a collective call. This was about waking people up to themselves, to seeing the patterns, the identity, the truth they've been avoiding. And then it moves down into post two, which is when leaders remove them. Sorry, leadership begins where titles end. And that was more to shift people and from positional identity to like the human identity. And in reality, leadership is not a title. It's something that comes from you, comes through you. It's how you show up for others. And then we've moved down to post three, which by far to me, I think was the best piece in that trilogy. And it's the vulnerability piece. And that's the one that it kind of reminds the leaders it takes the leader from being a performative type of leader, and it takes them into the truth of who they are. So that's arc one that was released in May. And I'm currently working on arc two that's set to come out at the end of September or beginning of October. And you can look at this more honestly like a kaleidoscope. So the first layer is the first layer of the kaleidoscope, and now we're taking a deeper dive into it. And then the final stage of this is set to be released sometime in April next year. And at its core, the trilogy guides people back to themselves, to from seeing who they are to aligning with who they are to then leading from their truth.
Exactly. These guides are very necessary, most especially in our time today. I'm so glad that the Arc One, which is actually how to actually make people recognize and also try to help themselves, and also see the sense of guide point that can help them to get the source of leadership and also help them groom better. And also the hack tool, which actually give more exposure in those perspective, and also the three as well. Those steps actually help in every single ways when someone wants to actually build some kind of attribute with themselves, and see how they can also explore the world more better in the right space. As we said, as you said earlier, leadership is not the title, it's the way we actually present ourselves right at the front of people. And that is why I would like to drive to the point of recognition. Because for listeners who have become successful leaders, but they feel disconnected from themselves, how do you think they can try to recognize when leadership has become a performance rather than an authentic expression of who they are, Mrs. Lillian?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can honestly feel it in your body long before your mind has the words for it. Leadership becomes performance when you're leading through pressure instead of presence. When the words or the decisions that you're making feel more like a role that you're playing instead of a truth that you're expressing. And the signs are subtle. You start bracing yourself. You over prepare, you speak out of obligation, or you feel the need to turn on, or you simply stop hearing your own voice underneath the actual expectation. And what I've realized from experience is that a leader starts to feel disconnected when they've abandoned the parts of themselves that actually made them great leaders in the first place. It's when they try to fit into these molds or these boxes that society told them they needed to fit in order to fit in. Authentic leadership, it's a feeling. It's something that comes natural that aligns with your identity. Whereas performative leadership, it feels like this heavy weight that you're carrying around.
That is very much important. That means one will definitely know if we are actually performing or we are actually doing it from within. And it shows the power of ourselves as well, who we really are. Because leadership sometimes, most especially if one is in a very different society, leading in a very different people kind of attribute, I think it could actually get us to the point whereby a lot of people want to, influence us in some areas to actually perform just to fit
Right.
in that society. And we have to always understand that who we are is who we are. And actually working in alignment with ourselves naturally will make us do what we feel is actually better and also help us relieve, also comfortable, and also see what we can do to make every single thing that we do. And also prevent us in the point of having so much regret due to this kind of leadership we actually attributed as well. And that is why I would just like to drive to the point of Max, because you say you do not help leaders, or you actually said you do not really help leaders who polish their marks, but help them put down the weight. What do you think are some of the marks leaders commonly wear? Because it's more like a performing as well. But what do you think are some of the marks they wear? And what emotional cost comes with maintaining them, Mrs. Lillian?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I love it. Thank you. So I've broken it down, the common masks, into three separate categories. So you have competence, certainty, and emotional neutrality. Competence is the one that says, I have it all together. And certainty says, I know exactly what I'm doing. And then you have emotional neutrality, and that's the one that says, I don't feel anything, nothing affects me. And although these masks, they look strong, they look bulletproof, right? But they're really heavy to carry. And what ends up by happening is that the leader not only starts to disconnect themselves from their teams, but they also start to disconnect themselves from who they are at the core. And over time, what happens is the emotional costs associated to this, they're quiet. They're quiet, but the cost is enormous. What happens is the leader starts to suppress their truth. Um, they start to ignore their needs, and they start to perform this version of themselves that it isn't even sustainable. And so that's where I come in. So I don't help the leaders polish this mask. I meet them where they are. I create a safe space for them, a space where they feel seen, where they feel heard, free of judgment. And I work with them so that they can recognize and they see that it's okay to drop that armor. It's okay to drop that mask. And I help them reconnect with themselves and reconnect with the parts that somewhere along the lines they forgot or they lost, so that they can not only start leading from a place that feels more authentic, but a place that feels true, a place that feels like them again, more human, that feels like home to them again.
Exactly. And let us just be honest, it is absolutely not easy when someone is in the position of leadership and those pressures are there when it comes to the marks and other situations that they have on board. And to be in the position whereby he or she can find someone who could actually provide that sense of safety is very much needed and important. And I do appreciate you for the wonderful insight as well. I would just
Yeah.
like to also drive to the point of identity and emotional intelligence. How do you think they influence the way a leader responds to pressure, conflict, uncertainty, and the expectation of the people around them, Mrs. Lillian?
Yeah. So identity is truly the lens for which leaders interpret everything. So, conflict, uncertainty, pressure, expectations, they're all viewed from this lens. And when a leader's identity is rooted in performance, pressure becomes personal, conflict becomes a threat, and expectations become a burden. Now, on the flip side, when a leader's identity is rooted in truth, it's rooted in authenticity, it's rooted at the core of who they are, emotional intelligence, it flows naturally through them. And they start to respond differently. They start to show up differently. So they start to respond with clarity instead of defensiveness, or they start to respond with curiosity instead of fear, or presence instead of pressure or performance. So that's how they kind of show up. In my personal opinion, I don't believe that emotional intelligence is a skill that you apply. You don't look at your calendar and say, hey, at my 2 o'clock meeting, I'm gonna apply some emotional intelligence with Bob. That's just not how it works. It's something that you embody. It's something that comes through you, right? And I personally feel that the leader starts to show up differently. They stop reacting with insecurities and they start to respond with or from alignment.
Definitely, that shows that there can actually be a transition of change. Despite how
Right.
difficult it could be, despite how defensive, sometimes a leader can be so defensive that he or she don't even have the channel to actually, I would say, deliver in way he or she wants to. So, for despite how it is, there can actually be a source of change for us to actually do more things from within, do it more naturally, because as we always say, a leader is always like the pillar. It's just like the viewpoint people are looking up to. And that kind of stacks, we do understand that we have to actually channel ourselves more naturally, be more authentic, and see how things develop from there. I do appreciate you for that wonderful insight, Mrs. Lillian. And that is why I would also like to drive to the point of physiological safety. What do you think physiological safety actually looks like beyond workplace language and policies? And how do you think leaders can try to create environment where people feel safe enough to speak honestly, contribute fully, and perform at a high level? Mrs. Lillian.
That is another really great question. Honestly, I love it. The way I see it is psychological safety. It's not a policy. It's a feeling. It's like it's like a heartbeat. It's the moment that someone realizes that they're not going to be punished for being human. Beyond workplace language, psychological safety looks like a leader who listens without defensiveness, who isn't afraid to admit when something isn't working, and who values honesty on top of perfection or performance. Um, that's the way I truly like kind of see that. And high performance, it's it truly does not come from pressure. It comes from clarity. When someone feels seen, when they feel safe, when they feel heard, they stop performing and they start contributing. That's when they start bringing their ideas, their creativity, their truth. That's when they start bringing that to the table. That's where growth actually happens. That's where the impossible starts to feel a bit more possible. And leaders create this space by modeling it. It's simple. You practice what you preach. When a leader puts down that mask, the whole team exhales. It's like the domino effect. And in that moment, in that specific spot, that place where no one's trying to be more than they are, that's where exponential possibilities begin. That's how I see it.
Exactly. And other people will also definitely see the changes, to be honest, because they realize something has changed. Because
Yeah.
actually living more honestly and also using ourselves as more as a transition, I think it actually helps because, we do understand how marks can actually be a source of pivot, a source of burden, and also other things. But if we can actually release it and actually standpoint from ourselves, because actually you actually driving more on the explanation of the physiological safety. It's made us understand that we actually dropping those sense of nerves and actually doing things more clearly and being open to who we really are. It actually creates a lot of opportunities and also people getting to understand us better and knowing how to also bring things into our perspective as well. Which is why I would
Right.
also like to drive to those who would be opportune to listen to our conversation and they realize they have been leading from obligation. They have been leading from so much pressure or an identity that no longer fits their position. It no longer is affecting them in many ways. So, what would you want them to remember about reclaiming themselves and learning to lead from a place that feels like home, Mrs. Lillian?
Yeah. Honestly, I want them to remember that the journey back to yourself or returning to yourself, it's not a failure, it's a homecoming. Pressure and obligation, it creates leaders who survive their role. And alignment creates leaders who inhabit them. If your identity no longer fits and no longer feels right, honestly, most likely the chances are you've outgrown the version of yourself that you've created for survival. Reclaiming yourself, it starts with honesty. You need to admit to yourself what no longer serves you, what no longer feels right, what no longer feels true. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to step outside the box or to take the road less traveled or to sit with the darkness, because it's in the darkness that you find your own light again, that you find your own voice. Leadership that feels like home, it feels it's rooted in identity, not in expectations. This isn't about becoming someone new. This is about going back to the beginning, returning to who you are, returning to who you were before the world told you who you needed to be. And somewhere along the lines, you started to believe that that's who you needed to be. I think that's what I would want them to remember.
Exactly. Because sometimes when probably a leader who has actually got into a position actually give him or herself sense of reflection, sometimes they feel that huge pressure and burden and they ask themselves, how can I actually take this out? And that is why we actually need to build the attributes, as you said, of honesty, actually sitting down for us to identify these things and knowing how to make those adjustments to actually feel like home again. It is
Absolutely.
not actually more difficult for us to go outside the box, do things that are outside our source, do things that are outside our own shield, and actually try our best to be more productive in the society. I do appreciate you for the wonderful insights you brought to this conversation, Mrs. Lillian. And also, Mrs. Lillian, there is a question Alamani asked during the end of the show. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our forefathers' time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, what do you think that thing will be, Mrs. Lillian?
It would be authenticity. It'd be returning to who you are. That is so important. Like, we live in a world where it's filled with expectations and people thinking they need to act a certain way or look a certain way or be a certain way to fit into, you know, fit in with the crowd. But is that really what you want, to fit in with the crowd or to be your own person? You have one life. Life is what you make it. Like, you control your own destiny. So it's like I say, like, reach for the stars, but don't forget who you are. Don't get lost in the shiny stuff. Remember who you are at the core and what's important, because that's all you take with you.
Exactly. We do know that the digital world has actually caused more influence in that perspective. And we just need to try our best not to be a photocopy, because that is what I'll call it, a photocopy.
Right.
We shouldn't be
That's
a
true.
person who actually copies everything and actually say, okay, since it's like this, let me be like this. I think it
Yeah.
hinders a lot of things in us. It hinders our happiness, and most especially, it hinders us to grow because we are not actually growing from our own inner self, from who we really are. And it's until when we actually build ourselves from who we really are, that is when we learn and grow. So we do
Yeah.
understand the attributes and the things that are happening out there, but we just need to stand, because sometimes when we live in our authentic self, we know that sometimes we can be different in the society. We can be the different one. But that is how we actually need to stay. And that is how people need to see us so that we can actually be a source of growth, adjust and actually grow, and actually know how we can also fit in that society as well. I do want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time and the opportunity for us to have this profound and insightful conversation today. Thank you so
Thank
much, Mrs. Delia.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, Mrs. Lillian. Have a wonderful day, Mrs. Lillian. Bye bye.
You as well. Thanks. Bye.